I raised an idiot. Parents share their kids' dumbest moments. When my son was 11 years old, he confidently informed me he was pretty sure he knew everything there was to know, because he tried to think of something that he didn't know, and couldn't think of anything. When one of my daughters tries to insult the other by telling her how ugly she is, they're identical twins. Told my kid that carrots help you see in the dark, he then went into the basement with a carrot and started waving it around like a flashlight. My 13-year-old son was sniffing really hard and moving his head all around the area he was standing in. Slightly concerned he had lost his mind, I asked him what he was doing. He told me, "I farted. I'm trying to smell it all up, so you don't have to smell it." He's a thoughtful idiot. I'm the idiot kid, but when I was about 3, after preparing dinner, my mom would leave me alone in the kitchen. After I finished, I would search for some M&Ms to nibble at, knowing I wasn't allowed. Every time after I finished, I would go over to my mom and ask her, "Did you hear me eating M&Ms in the kitchen?" She would always reply yes, and I would always get so frustrated, because every time I tried to be as stealthy as possible. I never realized what blew my cover until I grew older. When my youngest son, who was 10 at the time, was getting his ears checked at the pediatrician and they found a foreign object in his left ear. Said object was a dead housefly. Because he thought sticking a fly in his ear would give him flying powers. He had caught it and shoved it in there alive about a week prior. I used to tell my kids not to take off their shoes and socks in the car, especially on short trips. Just leave them on so that we don't have to spend 5 minutes finding and putting them back on before we run into the store. Imagine a single dad with 2 young kids running around the car trying to reshoe my children in the grocery store parking lot in the middle of an Arizona summer. Yuck. One day we went to the store and my daughter was missing her shoe. It was nowhere to be found. "Daddy, I didn't want you to be mad that my shoe was off, so I threw it out the window." Made sense to a 5-year-old, I guess. One day after school my brother and I met up with my dad. He worked at the school, and the janitor, and began walking to the parking lot. We pass the elementary building and the janitor lets out a huge sign about some punk writing their name on the facade. My dad looks over and said, "It's the same name as my kid, but at least his name is spelled differently since it has a C in it." Loud gasped my brother, "I forgot the C." He was not the sharpest tool in the shed. When I asked my 14-year-old if she could please bring me a piece of cake, she cut it, forgot why, then ate it. My son spent 18 months of his teenage years telling people he was born in Brazil. He was born in Bristol. When the Peter Pan peanut butter recall happened 10 to 12 years ago or so, due to salmonella, my then 15-year-old daughter came in from school, and as she was walking past the living room, TV was on. She stopped and watched the news report about the salmonella outbreak. She got this aha light bulb moment and said, "Oh, now I get it. It's about peanut butter." All day at school I kept hearing Peter Pan was killing people around the country, and I thought he had turned bad or something and was now a villain. I just stared at her waiting for her to say she was joking and didn't really think Peter Pan was real, but no, she just went upstairs to her room like we just had a normal conversation about normal, everyday events. My son came to our house to visit. He didn't live with us, we weren't home, but we on our way home, so he let himself in. We walk in and he's freaking out about breaking our newly adopted cat or something to that effect. I asked him what was she doing. She looked fine to me. He said she was vibrating when she sat on his lap. This is where he learned about cats purring. He hadn't been around a lot of cats, so I'd. My youngest son, 14 years old, when we were on a train and he was looking outside, "Mom, what are these plants?" Me, "They are potato plants." He, "Fries are made from potatoes, right?" Me, "Yes, of course. You know that, we made our own, can't you remember?" He, "They should plant fries instead. No one likes potatoes." He looked at me with a face that said, "I invented space and time travel, bow in front of your genius, son." I just closed my eyes and hoped for the best. He is a site engineer now and does well in life, because everything that isn't job related is managed by his wife. She is a godsend and I try to be the best mother-in-law that exists, because I want her to stay with him forever. I asked my kids what the biggest dinosaur was and my oldest, 15Y/O male, said paleontologist without skipping a beat. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Then my friend told my 10-year-old that the dirt on the car tasted like candy, so he licked it. He tried to get his 6-year-old brother to do it, but even he wasn't falling for it. At least 3 out of 5 kids will move out of my house eventually. When my son was disappointed by sex ed class, he thought they were going to learn some moves. Daughter calls me, there is a cop behind me with his lights on. What should I do? My dad's moment was when I made him drive around with me because my car had been making a thunk noise every time I made a turn. After 15 minutes he announced it was the baseball bat in my trunk rolling around. My daughter was a messy teenager who had to be told to clean her room. She had a habit of letting dishes pile up on her nightstand. We were on her ass constantly about not letting dishes, especially sports bottles of juice, sit around because they ferment. Well, one day the husband and I were in our bedroom and heard an explosion and our daughter scream. We ran to her room to find one of her bottles of juice had finally given into the pressure of the fermented juice and literally blew to pieces. The explosion was so powerful the top left a hole in her ceiling and there were tiny pieces of sports bottle shrapnel everywhere. She's my smart one. My dad is a truck driver, so I was the adult male figure in my kid sister's life. One day when she was around 14 or so, I took her to McDonald's for dinner and I asked her what she wanted and she said McNuggets. I pull up to the speaker and start ordering. Hello, I'll take an 8-piece McNuggets with a high C. My sister quickly reminds me, tell them no onions. I'll also take a quarter-pounder meal with a Sprite. Sister again says no onions. The cashier asked, will that complete your order? Sister getting mad, says no onions. Yes, that will be all, I say calmly and I pull forward. My sister is getting really pissed and asked, why didn't you tell them no onions on mine? I look at her and say just as loudly, on your chicken nuggets? It dawned on her and she couldn't look up and show her face when I asked the cashier at the window to please make sure there are no onions on her order of McNuggets. I don't think he's an idiot, but I think he lacks common sense because he'll take a bite of food, it will be scalding hot. He'll cry and act like he's dying, but won't spit it out. He'll say, Mommy, it's hot. And I'll say, well, I told you to wait for it to cool down, or then blow on it or something to that effect. He will say no, and then continue taking scalding hot bites and crying that it's too hot. In his defense, his father's the same way. My son yelled at me from outside to come get his toy from the grass. He was standing in the driveway. When I asked why he couldn't get it himself, he explained he was only wearing one shoe. When I asked why he was only wearing one shoe, he replied that he could only find one sock. He knew there was a frozen pizza in the garage but couldn't find it. Didn't even think to check the freezer. I had my sister text my mom that she forgot her phone at home. Please subscribe, like and share,